Good evening for those watching at home. This is the first meeting in 2023 of the Legislative Committee for District 191. Here is Anna and I, committee members, but we're going to actually take a pause because this month's agenda is meeting with our locally re-elected or newly elected legislators to inform them of our district's 2023 legislative platform and share more information about ISD 191 with them. So we will be waiting for them to join us unless they are here already, which they might be. But we're going to still take a 2-minute pause to get ready. So we'll be back on air shortly. Launched. So we had began with a welcome, but we'll re-welcome because you're here, so we want to have an opportunity for you both to introduce yourselves. I'm Leslie Chester, school board member, just began my second term, so was just sworn in a couple weeks ago. And now will be chair of this committee this calendar year and had been previously, so I think I've met you, Representative Hansen. So.
I'm Director Anna Werb. Nice to meet you. Welcome. I'm going into my third year on the school board. This year I'll be the vice chair. So I was previously the treasurer. So I'm very excited to hear about your platforms and where you stand for as far as education, and excited to have you guys here.
Yep.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm Representative Jess Hansen. I represent 55A, so that includes the entire city of Savage and then the northwest part of Burnsville. So if we're looking at 35, it's the west side of 35, north of the Parkway, and cuts off a little bit before 42. But I live right over by Southern Lights in the Vista View neighborhood there, and my kids both go to Burnsville School. Well, my oldest just graduated from Burnsville High School. I have to remember to say that now. And then my youngest is in middle school in 6th grade. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'll turn it over to Kayla.
Oh, thank you. First of all, congratulations on your victories. I'm Representative Kayla Berg. I represent the middle chunk of Burnsville and share just a bit with Jess on one side and Liz Ryer on the other side. Okay. Both of my kids graduated from Burnsville schools. And so it's really exciting for me to be here to learn about what direction you're going in this year and how we can be helpful.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for being part of our 191 family, as well as for supporting our district and your work at the state capitol. Just to kind of kick off a little bit, so yeah, we had last calendar year, but had approved our legislative platform that we want to share with our legislators for 2023, which was sent digitally to you, but it's also in your hands, and so kind of going through that. again, our priority, and it's something that maybe we would love to hear from you on too, because we know that our governor has been very vocal about supporting education. We want to reduce the cross subsidy for special education and English learner funding. We want to provide a legislative exemption to allow local control of property sale proceeds, which I know that Representative Hanson, you've been very active with us on, and would love to, and we know we have some hearings coming up, so remove the 15-day residency requirement for school students enrolled in online schools, increase Safe Schools funding to expand to mental health supports, provide targeted funding to increase diversity among teachers, make funding for voluntary pre-K permanent, and increase access to school-based pre-kindergarten programs, and continue Medicaid eligibility as a means of direct certification for a student to receive free school meals. And that's something coming out of the pandemic. So hearing that, and we also have some really great new communication tools about Spark and Ignite and Blaze along that you also have too, that gives you kind of an update and some current statistics on things happening in our district and in our schools that are great promotional materials. We'll give you time to peruse those. If you have any questions about those materials as well, we can certainly answer there. And so kind of hearing about a bit about our legislative platform. We love to hear, I know session just started for you both, kind of what your where you're at with education supports or your agendas as well.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Well, I am on the Education Policy Committee for the second time, and so that work is really important to me. Looking at your priorities here, I can say that they very closely mirror what we are already doing and the bills we're already hearing. So today was Increased Teachers of Color Act. We've heard on free school lunches for every child in the state of Minnesota. My bill, which I am very excited about, is one of the top 10 priority bills this session, was heard in the Senate today and went very well. I know that one of their testifiers is going to be featured on KARE 11 this evening, may have already happened. I don't know which segment. So that'll bring attention to it, which is pretty great. But it is historic investment in student mental health personnel. And so we are talking about more school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, school nurses, any support personnel that touches a child's life. And we know that the student ratio with a school counselor or school psychologist is out of control. I had one school counselor that I spoke with was in tears because she had 1,000 students to just her. And the recommended amount is 250, which is still a lot for one person, but that's kind of what, the standard. So it's out of control. And the students aren't getting the help that they need. And the counselors and other support personnel can't take care of the students in the way that they would like to. So for both sides of that, it's a really critical issue right now, and especially coming out of the pandemic. We have always known that our students have come to school with trauma that's been unaddressed for a variety of reasons. And just like they can't learn on an empty stomach, we know that as well, they can't learn if their trauma remains to go unaddressed and becomes unmanageable. So I am very excited about that. We are asking for $250 million to fund that because really there is no price on our children's mental health. And so we want to be very aggressive about it and make sure that it happens this session. What else are we doing? We are looking to introduce more culture in the schools by having an Indigenous Day, People's Indigenous Day, rather than Columbus Day, and then spending some time on that day if schools are open to add that to their curriculum for that day, a little history about our Indigenous people. And so we're really moving at a fast pace overall in what we're doing with our trifecta, but especially in the education arena. I suppose that's the one I'm paying a lot of attention to. And then I think you're going to hear from Representative Hansen about just the huge work that she's been doing and the magnitude of lives that it will touch and how well it's going. She just presented today in my committee, so I'm excited to hear her recap for you.
Says the woman carrying one of the top 10 bills to make sure kids in our schools have great mental health access. So thank you, Kayla. And so I love that your agenda lines up with what we are doing. When we were out knocking doors and talking to our community members, we heard over and over how important it is that we prioritize our children. As mothers, as Minnesotans, we know that they're the future of this state and they deserve all the best. So I love this agenda, and I'm glad we're in sync on that. So a few things in particular that I'll mention. I serve on the Children and Families Committee, which has a lot of oversight for our child care assistance programs, child welfare programs, which would include the child protection programs, MFIP, and some of the other programs that help our families that are struggling with poverty. One bill I'm really excited about, it has not been dropped yet, so this is a bit of a preview, but we've heard a lot of comments about the need for care coordination with the mental health services to make sure that we're connecting these islands of services that we have. And so providing vehicles between those islands is very important for the providers as well as for the practitioners in more of the clinical settings. And so allowing them to communicate between each other is really important. So keep an eye out for that bill to drop. It would take too long to summarize all of it here, but it is a bill that I think over the years we've talked about the fact that we don't really have a mental health system in Minnesota. We are really just a patchwork of Band-Aids. And so what I had talked with some of the stakeholders about was I really wanted them to kind of come together and to look at what all of them needed, whether it's CTSS or, at some of the other mental health, school link things, and figure out what can we do to really help. And especially with this surplus that we're seeing, we have an opportunity to really invest in something that hasn't been there before. And so I'll be carrying that bill. You're going to just keep an eye out. There's a lot of money going into our school linked care coordination, and a number of other mental health children's services. On the Children and Families Committee, we've already heard our bill about voluntary pre-K, and so freshman Maria Perez-Vega is carrying that, and so she did a really great job talking about the importance of these programs. I would like to continue expanding those, and I think that's a pretty common thing across the board as well. And then increasing our child care assistance programs, and then also making sure that the emergency CCAT program can be funded as well. So we've already done that work, and that's moving through our committees. Some of the other pieces on here, I'll just speak to maybe the one that's a little more boring for people, right, is the building sale of the Metcalf building, making sure that we can apply those funds right back into our students. And so we'll have a hearing about that tomorrow with Superintendent Battle and more. And so we're really looking forward to that. There's another situation, another school going through this, so we're not alone in this ask this year. And so it's really important that we make it clear the district's working on the debt, like that's there, but when we have to make the hard decisions to close schools, parents and families expect us to inject that money back into our children. So I'm excited to go over that bill tomorrow. Free school meals. I was a hungry kid, and so I'm really glad that you have this on here because I had the big red stamp on my hand so often, and I know what that feels like for our kids. And as a solo mom, it's hard to always afford, to be able to keep those lunch accounts full as they need to be, so I'm excited to see that. I think the other bill that I'll talk about is really just to make sure that all of our kids have a safe and healthy learning environment at school. We've heard about the prevalence of racism and bullying in schools. Our district, I thankfully have not heard as many stories. From around the state, we've heard quite a few, but I'm really pleased with how we have created a culture, both in Burnsville and within this district, to make sure we know that everybody belongs and we are all valued and all have dignity and worth. That's not the case everywhere, though, and I think spreading that love out to other communities is important. So I've been working on a bill called the Beyond Bullying Bill. I had 35 co-authors full when we dropped it the first time, and we have a clone bill circling with Mary Frances Clardy, Representative Frances Clardy, to make sure we can get as much support as we can. I met with AMSD and MSBA. They already have a policy in place, but what this will do will codify it into law to require districts to implement those policies. You already have one, and I think that you're doing a great job with that. And I, again, just want to see more districts do well with that. We know that the mental health of our kids is just so drastically affected when they experience that kind of bullying for their identity. And creating a safe environment is important to me. So with that, I would turn it for questions. I could talk about this all day, though.
That's very exciting for us to hear as well. Maybe talk about, because I know that, things go through the House, but they also go through the Senate. How are you partnering with your Senate partners in some of these bills?
First of all, I just want to say some of the things that you're looking at on here, some of the things that we have talked about already moving through the House, what I think is really neat and creates a sense of urgency and brings a lot of support is all of these bills that we're talking about are intersectional. So if our kiddos of color are not seeing teachers that look like them or other administrators, any adult in the building that looks like them, that affects their educational experience. If they're hungry, right, that affects their mental health. If they're being bullied, it affects their mental health. If they have to have the red stamp and they feel othered, that affects their self-worth, their self-esteem. Representative Feist had the menstrual equity bill. If you can't afford products and you're having accidents or you're missing school, any way that makes you feel othered or different is going to affect your mental health. And so what is really, really important, I think, is as we're all presenting these bills, as we're presenting them in committee or we're talking about them out in the community, is drawing that sort of connective circle in literally everything that we're doing. The governor has put the cross-subsidy for special education as a priority. We saw historic funding in childcare so that it's beginning, kind of like Rep. Hansen was talking about, it's beginning already and then building upon as we go through that pre-K and then on up for our kids and having that sort of symmetry there. In terms of working with our Senate partners, there are people in the Senate, just like members of the House, where education is really their jam, so to speak. And so they're the ones that you can typically turn to in order to get the work done over there. But it is also really neat because I know that they are trying to spread some of these big, sort of meaty, if you will, bills out to some of the freshmen. Because what I'm finding out, much like Rep. Hansen, who referenced Maria carrying one of the bills, is these freshmen are amazing. Mm-hmm. They are coming in with new energy, innovative ideas, just coming from a variety of life experience and backgrounds like all of us do. But it's really, really exciting to watch what they're bringing forward, things that we haven't thought of or ways that we hadn't thought about approaching it. And so that's kind of one of the fun things that you can find out about working with your Senate partners is how they fill in the gaps in your bill and so that we get the best possible outcome. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, that's awesome.
We always remember to talk about things after we finish talking about it. I mean, this is like politician 101, I feel like sometimes. But I think we have a really great partner in Senator Port. She is just such like a mover and a shaker that with bills that if she can't carry them, she always knows who to recommend and who can do some space. And this is what happens when you elect organizers, right? Is that we're able to get in there and really do some of that grassroots organizing work that's so important, that really brings communities together and brings you to the table so that our kids, our superintendent, whoever it might be, can speak about the issues for them and share our power with them. So that's been really exciting. I wanted to mention specifically one of the programs that I think is going to be a great bipartisan effort is the pathway programs. You get to have a model that the rest of the state is going to look at. And I'm so excited to brag about you guys there because on the higher education committee, we're finding that in all of our higher education settings, we're seeing decreasing enrollment. And there's a number of factors to that. We saw an increase in the 2008 recession because people were looking for new careers, but then we've seen a steady decrease since then, despite there being pretty significant investments in the Dayton administration and so far in the Walz administration. And so that Pathways program, just as much as we can keep promoting that and talking about that and encouraging other schools to keep doing that, that's just such a priority for Chair Pulowski as well. And so one of the bills that I'm carrying this year will offer 1 high school credit to youth who work in disability group homes. Up to 350 hours, they get 1 credit.
That's cool.
So help encourage kids to go into caring professions, because right now we are seeing such a workforce shortage there. I'm the Vice Chair of Economic Development, and so looking at how we can create economic opportunities and then kind of feed that over and partner with our workforce team and committee is really important. So that bill I'm really excited about. I'm also authoring a bill that's upcoming to offer free 4-year college for social workers. We are presently facing, by 2030, that we'll be 15,000 social workers short, which, to Representative Berg's point, is that we need more of us in schools. And in order to do that, we need to draw people to Minnesota. And so that's one of the exciting programs. And I know we have a human services pathway sort of program here, and so I'm really excited to see how those programs can blend together. And I would love to just really dig into that and learn more about how that was started and everything. So maybe we can have a separate meeting to talk about that, so that we can maybe do more bills around that to create more Pathways programs.
Yes, because I also believe that coming out of the pandemic, we're going to find a teacher shortage too. There's not as many pursuing education as a profession. And as much as we want to diversify our teacher workforce, we're going to be facing a significant shortage as well. So it'd be great to see an incentive or a pathway that incentivizes people to pursue education.
And to move here to pursue that education. You know, it's 6 years, I think it is, 6 to 7 years for teaching, right? And so we have a future to build and to really get ready for. And so just kind of trying to prop up what free college can do for our workforce is kind of the pilot that I would like to create with that. Obviously, we would love to see free 2-year college across the board, so we want to keep pushing for that. And we want to continue helping juniors and seniors be ready to go straight into college and potentially graduate, with an associate's degree or be ready to go into a workforce. I mean, having a master's degree by 22 is pretty fabulous. That's a great way to really get on your feet and beat some of the economic challenges that so many folks in our community are generationally facing. And so I'm excited about that. As a first-generation college graduate, it gives me goosebumps to talk about it. So I'm really looking forward to that work.
Well, it's great that you mentioned that, because that's something that is available in 191 is an associate's degree, to be able to graduate with an associate's degree.
Yeah, and however
from
we
high
can
school.
continue to support those programs, if there's any gaps or spaces, I would love to hear about that, because like I said, there's a lot of energy on our higher education committee to move that work. And so we'll connect.
Because I think we have it where you can become a CNA before you graduate high school and all of that, which is...
I would be remiss if if I didn't mention, absolutely, when I toured the building where the Pathway programs is a part of the building, it was amazing. I was telling Dr. Battle that when we were on the bonding tour, we saw in the junior colleges a lot of what we were seeing in this building. And here we are, getting an opportunity for our kids to look at that and to experience that, when in other communities it's already in the community college level. But what I wanted to say was, I love all of the talk about sending our kids to college and all of the ways we can support them, and free college for social workers, because they are so needed, and I do know that we're on a shortage of them, and teachers as well. But I'm also really excited to, and always have been, as a labor organizer, to promote our pathways to the trades. I think that's another piece that we need to educate about, because our kids are like, well, I don't really know that I want to go to college. I can't afford college. That just doesn't look like it's for me. And then that's where it stops. They don't understand that there are different options out there, and options that offer, a great benefits package, a really great financial package, and something that they can do for as long as they're interested in it. So we're going to see some legislation around that, creating opportunities for kids, as well as also targeting women, people of color, and veterans to be able to enter into those careers as well. So I think I always have to stick up for like the kids going into the trades. Vice Chair of Labor, I'm hoping that we see a lot of support for that.
Yeah, and that's significant too. I mean, it's significant, and there's also a shortage in trades as well. So, like electricians, plumbers,
They are feeling
automotive, you have it.
And we have a lot of our contractors and business owners who've been running, here in the South Metro especially, are retiring. And so making sure that we are positioning our students to be able to take over potentially a small business. I'll be carrying a bill for MCCD, which does a lot of work to help people in Dakota County, Hennepin County, and kind of our region start a business from the ground up. And so they historically have gotten about 2.8 million, like a one-time investment of 7 million, like 2.8 million. My bill is going to increase that to 25 million because we want to make sure that entrepreneurship stays an option for students as well, whether they start a business and go to college to run that business or they're in a trade and running that business. Those entrepreneurship skills I think are really important. And so organizations like MCCD really offer just a great platform. How to start a business plan, how to get a bank account, how to get an EIN, all of the basics, to run a business. One great story I heard from a business here in the community that she sells hair products. She was running her entire business from her phone. MCCD came in and helped her get a point of sale software so she could run her business from a computer and from, that could give her some more analytics around that. So just some of the opportunities they offer. So if you have students looking at entrepreneurship, please send them towards MCCD.
Plus, this is a great community to open a business in. I think we have a great environment for that, as well as we've got some industry here too. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in Burnsville, but maybe I'm just a big fan.
And what's great about, we have an awesome Pathways program in our high school for sure, as you've seen, but we've actually bringing Pathways down to pre-kindergarten. So so students are going to be dabbling and learning about different career pathways early, and then being able to really get their hands in it all in high school for sure. But yeah,
it's so interesting when I bring that up to people and say that we have pathways into elementary school. Now I can add pre-K to that comment too, because the looks they give me is just like, how? Right? And so again, I think there's just such a huge opportunity for us to share what we've learned in that and expand that to other communities. And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything, Anna?
Well, I just want to say that, this seems like a huge shift all of a sudden to be focusing on education. It seems like it's been on, the back burner for years. And then all of a sudden now it's like we have all this money to put into education. It's so long overdue. It's finally it feels like they're listening.
Yeah.
So this is very exciting. It's very I think what we need right now, coming out of so many years we spent in the pandemic, and now feeling like kids have suffered for it, just seeing how kids have struggled ever since coming out of the pandemic and coming back to school and struggled with mental health, just learning in general, falling behind. This is very great news to hear about all these bills, and hopefully the majority of them will pass. Yeah.
And soon.
Yeah.
And soon, yes.
And I think it helps when you have a teacher as the governor.
Yes.
That
Yes.
definitely influences things. But I think that, dare I say, I know this is not partisan, but dare I say, Democrats have been focused on education for a long time and face some barriers. And so I think when we are looking at the budget surplus that we have at the trifecta, we are being unapologetically bold and as I stated earlier, aggressive about our education agenda. And I think we're going to see a lot of things that maybe we never expected to see pass. And we're just going to go for it. We are, we're not waiting for permission on anything. No. And, I just wanted to comment on, sort of the Pathways program from pre-K up. I think that is so incredibly inspiring because school is the place that we hopefully reach our kiddos, and we start to show them different options that they have in life, which really sparks their passion for whatever it is that they go on and do. I come from, two college professors, so education was a big deal in my house. And I also don't have a college degree. And so it was along the way in school that I became interested in different things, became involved in more opportunities that came my way through my work in the labor movement. And here I am as an elected official. And so I talk to our kiddos a lot about, hey, you don't have to have a perfect path to this. You don't necessarily have to have a college degree. I am very glad my housemate does, with all of her incredible work and advice and knowledge around social work and how incredibly important that is in almost every area of our life. But I think it's also important to show people the example of what you can do if you take the opportunities that are presented to you. And I think a program like Pathways starts that out like immediately, which is super exciting.
Well, it's like being able to test drive so many different jobs, potential jobs, and maybe even thinking, and again, I'm an older person. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know if you all do.
You can be anything you want to be.
But to be able to have that opportunity to kind of like try and test different things, so that when you're thinking of whatever happens post-secondary, you kind of have maybe explored a few things to kind of go, I think I really feel over here,
I feel like Pathways, like the Pathways programs, are what it means to say you can be whatever you want when you grow up in action.
Yep.
Yeah.
We say that to our kids all the time, but really providing them those opportunities to explore that before they have a mortgage or student loans, right? And before there's all this weight of the world, and adulthood on them. I kind of bobbed and weaved in my 20s with a baby, and, it's a lot to put on people, and the world puts enough on our shoulders. So, after we saw just record, I don't know what the word is, disinvestment or the lack of investment or just extracting money from our public education system through the administration that shall not be named, that really set us back. And so to your point, Anna, that we need to make sure we're making these investments now, because we're following up on 20 plus years of losses. Yeah. And that's an entire generation of kids that felt the weight of taking money out of public schools. And that can't be. We can't continue that. And I think fierce people like us, we serve alongside a lot of fierce people like us. So like Representative Berg said, we are unapologetic in righting the wrongs of the past and making these investments because our kids deserve it, and making sure that we're listening to you and investing in the places that it matters, which is, again, why I'm so happy your agenda aligns so well with our agenda.
So something on that isn't in this agenda that I want to be fierce about, and it's something that every district continues to face, but it's something that we've heard is because all districts continue to be faced with budget cuts because the student ratio that the state supports doesn't keep with inflation. So I understand that that's something, or we've heard rumblings that this is a possibility. We might be hearing that that the state is interested in funding to inflation.
Yes, I think in a number of areas, but I would say stay tuned. There are things that are coming that I think, I honestly think the only way that we are going to do it is with a trifecta. So in this moment, there is literally nothing that's off the table in terms of how we can take care of our communities, and especially our students.
And I'll just say, indexing things to inflation it saves taxpayers money in a way, right? Because there's a lot of things that we don't index to inflation, which means legislators and the government have to go back every 2 years or 4 years, depending on which body you're in, and renegotiate. Are we going to fund this? Are we going to fund that? We're seeing it right now. I'm carrying a bill for this is boring, but disability waiver rate system, which is a payment method within the DHS system that determines how we pay disability care workers. Yeah. right? And so every couple of years we go back and we have to fight for this money. And what that means in practice is that there are folks with disabilities who we as a state have promised to provide services for that are not getting those services because we can't keep staff in positions when they're making $12, $13 an hour for a very hard job. Because the amount that we set was set 4 years ago since we didn't get a change last year, right? And so indexing things to inflation, in my opinion, is always a good idea because it really does make things flow a little bit more smoothly and it keeps things better. Now, I'm no economist, so somebody may come forward and have a better argument, but just in practice and in principle, to me, it makes a lot of sense to do that.
Yeah, because I just remember, like, with school budgeting, we kind of wanted to know what the state was going to provide as an increase, and we've always been, in previous legislative platforms, we've been asking for like 5 or 10%, and then always coming out at somewhere between 0 and 2.
Right. I think you're going to see that come up.
Which is still not quite
Yeah.
enough in terms of
Yep.
where the districts are still being faced with having to make cutting decisions because we don't have the revenue.
And I would say one of the best ways to let people know that that's a priority for you is to just keep calling and sending in letters and emails to all of us. Inundate us. We've been inundated with some unpleasant ones. It would be nice to get some some more targeted to our values information. And if I were you, just keep watching Ed Finance and Ed Policy because I think you're going to see that come up.
Yeah, awesome.
And I did have a question about, so we have on here to provide targeted funding to increase diversity among teachers. So to us, we have like our Grow Your Own program. And so I'm curious, like, what does that look like at the state level? Like when you talk about, increasing diversity in schools of like the staff and trying to, bring in more diverse teachers, what is it that the state, how does the state view that? Like, what funding do you guys do to reach that goal?
Well, I know that efforts around recruiting and retaining teachers of color, this legislation has been around for a decade, and we have struggled to get it across the finish line. There's opposition not only from the Republicans, but there are concerns out there. For example, one argument is that it's really great to recruit teachers of color here, but if layoffs come around, they typically are last in, first out. That's not really a credible argument, but it is one that keeps coming up, and it makes it challenging to get support and to have folks listen to it and prioritize it. So the author of the bill this year, Representative Hassan, is just an incredible advocate for it. She doesn't take any argument against it seriously. I don't have the bill brief in front of me, or I could talk more about the funding stream and the numbers. But it is one of the biggest priorities in our Education Finance Committee this year.
I would just add to that, we're seeing a lot of restrictions, in my field around, licensure requirement and these tests, right? And so I think that's a big part of Chair Hassan's bill is that, we have all these extra tests in there, but does that really measure if a teacher is ready when we have so many preparedness programs and readiness programs? So when I was preparing to present my bill today, that was what they were discussing, and that just makes a lot of sense across a lot of industries and work groups. And so I think that's a big piece of it. I'll just say we have to also remember that if we're going to encourage folks to come here and work, we have systemic issues that we need to address to make Minnesota a safer place than it is for Black, African, Latinx, Indigenous folks. And we have to look at the roots of that. Depending on which year of the study you look at, but in 2017, Minnesota ranked as the second most racist state in the nation in terms of home ownership, income, incarceration, and employment. Those are very important metrics, right? And so while we don't particularly have explicit policies on file, for example, like redlining anymore, we know that that's wrong, we've done that work, but there are other things we need to do. And when I was presenting my Beyond Bullying work, that's part of the reason I talk about it is it is important to protect our kids who are experiencing this, but it's also important to teach these bullies who are perpetuating it why that's not okay. Because those are the kids who grow up and someday work in a position of power who then that bias affects that. So, having a caring and compassionate environment for all kids, including the ones who are bullying, not just suspending, not just expelling, not just criminalizing, really having a reparative and inclusive disciplinary model for that kind of behavior, and educating about why hate is wrong and why it hurts our communities. I think that's a reparation model that we can really get behind. So I always say, we obviously want to have more teachers of color, but racism in the workplace is a problem.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that that's a workplace safety issue and that we talk about it boldly and unapologetically, that everybody deserves to be safe at work too from those practices. Now, it's not to say it's the administration or boards or anybody like that, but it's important that we have those practices kind of just near our hearts and remembering that everybody has dignity and worth and we ought to treat everybody like it.
Yeah, and we know it's a pervasive issue in our schools. Another bill, I'm glad that some of her language jarred my memory a little bit. Another bill that we have already heard was around, first of all, suspensions and expulsions, and we know that it disproportionately affects our kids of color. And then also today we heard right after Rep. Hansen's bill, a bill around not taking away recess from our kids. And both of those bills are huge equity pieces, right? And so again, talking about drawing that circle of intersectionality, if we have teachers of color and the kiddos that don't see themselves from the front of the classroom finally do, and that there's a innate comfort level there, then the teachers are reaching these children in a different way. And I bet we would see less suspensions. I bet we would see less sort of inappropriate behavior with our students because they are finding adults in the school that are relatable. And so one thing that you said today when you were presenting your bill that was really neat, and I hadn't heard you say it before, was teaching all of our kids, but even the ones that are the bullies, to be kind. And I think when we are looking at all of the things that we've talked about tonight, whether it's more mental health personnel, whether it's, every child has free lunch and breakfast because hungry brains don't work, right? If we're talking about teachers of color and other adults in the school that look like the rising majority of our students, and we're teaching them all to be kind, and we're teaching them all why hate isn't, is bad. If we're teaching them those core values from people that look like them and may have a better understanding of their life experience, then I think we get closer to our goals in our classrooms than we've been in a long time. And so we're sort of talking about a culture shift, which is long overdue, which we know we've seen in the social work field, right? It's a culture shift on, well, it's not really, you're not drawing in folks that want to be in that field. I know in my mental health bill, we've built this coalition, and the school counselors are saying, look, this isn't a field anybody is clamoring to be a part of because you don't get to reach your students the way you thought you were going to. You have these giant class sizes and you have these giant proportions of students per school psychologist, school social worker. You have nurses that can't keep up with all the things that students are bringing in, or you have no nurses. So you have, the people that check you in at the front desk administering medicine. So there's all of these different ways that if we just have a culture shift in all sorts of areas of our education, we're going to start seeing the kind of results that we've been hoping for, but that we've underfunded with balancing budgets on the backs of education and all the supporting roles that people play in that. So I was really, really excited to hear you talk about teaching everyone to be kind, because what if that was just part of the values? What if that was just part of the core curriculum that we put into our students instead of, productivity and passing standardized tests and all of the sort of pressure that we put on our students to achieve, which is another thing that leads to mental health issues, which is another thing that leads to bullying, right? And so what if we just, taught kids to be kind, and we taught them how to sort of address and share their emotions with each other? And how much healing would we do? And so that we would get into a space where there isn't the bullying, there isn't the racism. There are core values being taught to our students in addition to academics. And I think that we're making movement towards that with some of the bills, like what Rep. Hansen is putting forward with, more mental health, with teachers of color bringing in all that life experience, and changing the way we do education.
That's awesome. So it really resonates like restorative justice modeling, which is really cool.
We all do better when we all do better, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and the thing is all kids benefit from a diverse workforce and a diverse teaching staff. All of our kids do. And so I think that's just such an important piece of this. And, it's not that, we know that schools embed, some of the core values Rep. Berg was mentioning, but really kind of getting to the root causes of some of it and understanding how do we really just support these kids and getting to a place where, as the world becomes more and more populated and there are more and more people in Burnsville, in the last 40, 50 years, we've seen this community grow exponentially. And how do we make sure that everyone's there? And, the social work lens that I would add to what, she was saying is this is treating the whole person. This is looking at your biopsychosocial needs and incorporating a whole person-centered approach from cradle to college, and as Senator Port would say, and making sure that we're, really supporting the whole child in what they need. Every school is going to have different needs. We've heard that a lot of schools are like, we don't want that. Okay, fine, but your boards can decide, and we want to make sure we're providing the resources for that, and making sure all kids can benefit from what it looks like when we really, really understand that none of us are free until we're all free. And that liberation kind of mindset to make sure that we're all standing in solidarity with each other and fighting these battles with each other. When we come together, we can do amazing things. And I think that's what you're seeing this year in St. Paul is the power of a team, the power of togetherness, and the power that when you have a core value of just care. You heard me say it on the campaign trail. The politics of care is what we really need. And so that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at it through up in St. Paul is, does this take care of people? And that's what matters. We don't want to have unintended consequences. We want to avoid that as much as possible. It's not entirely avoidable all the time, but really looking at things through a lens of care and compassion. You can't lose, right?
And I would just say, in addition to that, our first term, I was really excited to see that I would say all of our chairs, in my experience, in the committees I was in, and it continues this year in the committees that I'm on, every single one of our chairs approached the work through a lens of racial, economic, gender, and environmental justice. And that was really important for me to see. So when we are making intentional carve-outs, on our policies that affect our marginalized communities, whether that's low-income communities, communities of color, our LGBTQ community members, right? All of the policies and all of the work that we are doing passes through those, multifaceted lenses. And I think it's new. I think that maybe the last couple of terms, maybe the term before we got there. In the House, yeah. Not the Senate. Yeah. I think that's been true of the work that has been done. So it was very, I think, easy for us to step into the role of pushing those values forward in all of our work. And so I'm hoping the continuation of really being intentional about how we're approaching the work, not just in education, but in all of the policy making that we're doing. You get to the values or the politics of care. There's no other way to do it. Right. You've got to be inclusive, you've got to be intentional, and you have to be unapologetically bold about what we're asking the state to do.
You guys make it easy for us, City of Burnsville, you belong here, 191, community strong. You make our job easy when you give us those kind of principles and flags to carry with us to St. Paul. So thank you for just staying true to the values that this community wants. And just thank to all the community members who have stepped up to build a school board like this, to bring in a superintendent like Dr. Battle, to elect people who are here to fight for our kids. This is the voice of our community speaking, and it's just such an honor to get to do this and to amplify their needs. And I couldn't be more proud of our community.
Well, the honor
Plus,
is
also,
ours.
we're
Back
led
to
by
you.
women.
Yes.
From Mayor Couts to the two of us and Lindsay Ford and our superintendent. I mean, I don't know, maybe that says something. But just to echo what we've been talking about tonight, it is truly an honor to, and I'm humbled that the community keeps putting their faith and trust in me, in Lindsay, and Jess. I think that it's a responsibility that none of us take lightly, but we do have just an incredible working relationship and incredible relationships even outside of the legislature with our community leaders. And I think that's really exciting, especially for a community as diverse as ours is. I think we do an incredible job of really focusing on sort of the vibrant patchwork of all of our different communities, and having a lot of spaces that feel very welcoming, and hopefully finding more ways to do that in the future. I'm specifically thinking of when we redevelop the Burnsville Mall area. I hope that we're going to make that very culturally friendly. So we have some big opportunities here in Burnsville to make sure that we are highlighting every one of us in this community.
Well, thank you both so much, and thank you for your investment in prioritizing education. We are very thrilled to be working with you, alongside you in these efforts.
Yes, we're lucky to have you both.
Oh, thank you.
Lucky to have you.
To be a part of this. Are you kidding?
Oh, it's feeling like a group hug.
Politics of care. This is what it's about.
Maybe they could be the new Burnsville, just a big group hug.
Well, thank you both for joining us tonight, and that concludes our legislative committee, and we'll be back next month. Thank you.
Wonderful.